Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. We're almost to the weekend. Hope you guys are off to a great start and got you guys' coffee and you're good to go. I'm going to pick up in First Peter chapter 3. 1 Peter chapter 3. And it says, I'm going to read out the Message Bible, then we'll go to the ESV. But it says, the same goes for you wives. Be good wives to your husbands, responsive to their needs. There are husbands who are indifferent, as they are to any words about God. Will be captive by your life of holy beauty. What matters is not your outer appearance, the styling of your hair, the jewelry you wear, the cut of your clothes, but your inner disposition. Cultivate inner beauty, the gentle, gracious, kind that God delights in. The holy women of the old were beautiful before God that way and were good, loyal wives to their husbands. Sarah, for instance, taking care of Abraham, would address him as my dear husband. You'll be true daughters of Sarah if you do the same, unanxious and unintimidated. Today we're just talking mostly about wives and submission, and husbands. We'll get there tomorrow, Tuesday, God willing. But it's very good. But one thing I just want to point out is that sometimes I know from my past mistakes is that we like us men because we have authority that we're able to demand or create fear into making our better half submit, and that is not the proper submission. As husbands, we gotta love our wives as Christ loved the church as well. And so the way Christ loves us in the church is the same way we must love them and be so graceful to them too as well, and forgiving. This does not mean that you have to mistreat them and then expect submission in return, because that's not going to happen. You're spinning tires in the mud, buddy. But anyways, chapter 3, ESV, it says, likewise, wives, be subject to your own husbands, so that even if some do not obey the word, they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives, when they see your respectful and pure conduct. I like what the Enduring the Word says in .org. God says, the godly wife will be submissive to her husband. This submission isn't a reward for the husband's good behavior, as the proper order of the home God commands it. The teaching about submission was especially relevant to the first century married woman who had begun to follow Jesus. She would ask questions such as, should I leave my husband, or should I change my behavior towards him, or should I assume a superior position to him because now I'm in Jesus? In the ancient culture, in the culture of the ancient world, it was almost unthinkable for a wife to adopt a different religion than her husband, Christian woman who came to Jesus before their husbands needed instruction. Proper submission in the home follows the same principles of submission as toward government or employees. It is the submission not only of the actions but also of the heart, as demonstrated by the surrendering heart of Jesus back in 1 Peter chapter 2 verses 21 through 25. The call for submission is not merely a call for love and considerate action. It is a call to take place of submission to authority. The ancient Greek words translated submission was used outside the New Testament to describe the submission and obedience of soldiers in the army to those of superior rank, and literally means to order under. Verse 3, do not let your adorning be external, the braiding of your hair and putting on a gold jewelry or the clothing you wear, but let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart, where the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. For this is how the holy women who hoped in God used to adorn themselves, by submitting to their own husbands. As Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, and you are her children, if you do good and do not fear anything that is frightening. You see, I told her to start calling me Lord. No, I'm just kidding. Totally kidding. That's a joke. All right. So hold on real quick. I wanted to point this out to you guys. It says, when it said be submitted to your own husband, it says, Peter carefully observed that wives are called to submit to their own husbands and not to all men in a general sense. Male headship is God's command principle for home and church, not for society in general. The principle of submission was presented in many different ways in the New Testament. So Jesus submitted to his parents, Luke chapter 2, verses 51. Demons submitted to disciples, Luke chapter 10, verse 17. Citizens should submit to the government and authority. You'll find that in Romans chapter 13 and 1 and 5, and Titus chapter 3, verses 1, 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 13. The universe will submit to Jesus. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 27, and Ephesians chapter 1, verse 22. Unseen spiritual beings submitted to Jesus. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 22. Well, sheesh, since we're here, let me see. Yeah, look at that verse. Who has gone into heaven and is the right hand of God with angels, authorities, and powers of having been subject to him. I like testing the spirit. I'm sorry. That was a little sidetrack there. Christians submit to the church leaders. Christians should submit to their church leaders. 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verses 15 and 16, and 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 5. Wives should submit to their husbands, which we learned in Colossians chapter 3, verse 18, Titus 2, 5. 1 Peter 3, 5, Ephesians 5, 22 through 24. So there's many examples. But one thing I wanted to point out right here in the notes was Peter's advice to the husbands is compressed, perhaps because he addresses at more length those under authority who are more likely to be mistreated like slaves and wives. The word likewise is merely a transition. It does not mean husbands should submit to their wives, since scripture never teaches this. To live is in an understanding way, probably focuses on a living in accord with God's will, which includes understanding the needs of a wife. Interpreters differ over whether the weaker vessel means weaker in terms of delegated authority, emotions, or physical strength. Peter is probably thinking of the general truth that men are physically stronger than a woman and may be tempted to threaten their wives through physical and verbal abuse, which took place like back in biblical days. Like guys were like beating up their wives, and it was completely normal, I guess, back then. Now you go to jail. It says women and men share an equal destiny as heirs of the grace. It gets better. Check this out. It says Peter, a grace of life. Peter does not think women are inferior to men, but for both equal made in God's image. See that? For both are equal made in God's image. Now, to tell you all that, just to say this. If husbands do not treat their wives in a godly way, the Lord will pay no heed to their prayers. Let's read that again, huh? If husbands do not treat their wives in a godly way, the Lord will pay no heed to their prayers. Talk about hitting the ceiling, you know? So in this passage, Peter addresses the subject of marriage is the institution of marriage, and the relationship of the husband and wife is to be a model of the union between Jesus and the church. The union between Jesus and the church is one established and rooted in love and submission. God does not have to command Christian wives in his word to love their husbands. But God does have to command Christian women to submit to their husbands. Submission is necessary for order and structure and in the household. Peter speaks in this situation about a Christian woman married to an unbelieving husband who might face persecution by him because of her Christian beliefs. In this case, Peter states that the women's Christian lifestyle conduct, the Christian lifestyle, conduct, and inward beauty may win her husband to Christ. Let me read something before I go. This is by C.H. Spurgeon. It says, how careful ought young people to be in choosing of their partners in life. When two horses pull together, how smoothly the chariot runs. But if one horse draws one away and the other pulls in the opposite direction, what trouble there is sure to be. Another one says, married life is not all sugar, but grace in the heart will keep away most of the sours. God bless you guys. Have a great day.